Welcome to Headline to Heartline. Every door we open reveals not just a story, but the weight of those who had to knock first. Personally, I can't begin this episode without talking about how important the release of the Epstein files truly is. After Virginia's death, many of us felt that heavy silence that comes when a survivor's voice is suddenly gone. It's heartbreaking to imagine the loneliness of carrying that truth, knowing that the evidence still sits locked away in legal boxes. The law should now be the one to speak, not another woman forced to relive her trauma. We keep waiting for answers in a book, but the truth is that so many answers already exist inside those unreleased files. It's suffocating to know that they could bring clarity and accountability, yet remain hidden. It took me some days to finish Nobody's Girl, because the book is dense and it hurts. It hurts to picture Virginia at such a young age facing so many kinds of violence. I thought I already knew her story from years of covering Jeffrey Epstein and everything that spiraled around him. But reading her own words brought entirely new layers of pain and truth. This is not a book about headlines. It's about how it felt to live inside them. For those who already empathized with Virginia, that empathy will only deepen. Before we go further, if you missed the previous episodes, the one where we honored Virginia's legacy before the book came out, and the one where we discussed the official report of her death, I'm leaving both cards here on the screen so you can find them easily. In this video, I'll focus solely on the book itself. The Guardian called Nobody's Girl a devastating exposé of power, corruption, and abuse. The review points out how the memoir isn't just about what happened to her, but about what she saw, the hidden networks that allowed those abuses to thrive. It praises the raw honesty of her voice, sometimes apologetic, sometimes defiant, always aware that the reader might flinch. It's a story told by someone who refuses to be reduced to a victim. Giuffre describes being trafficked at 16, enduring the sadistic control of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and being handed to men whose names still open the doors of power. She writes about the horror of being assaulted by a prime minister, she doesn't name him, and how Epstein dismissed her pleas afterward. It's one of the moments that makes the reader stop breathing for a second. And yet, as readers, we also notice what's not there. The names that many expected, the ones speculated in headlines and whispered in courtrooms, do not appear. That silence is deliberate. Virginia explains that she feared being sued into bankruptcy by men with endless money and lawyers. She feared for her safety. Her publisher confirmed that several sections were reviewed and redacted for legal protection. So instead of names, she left titles: a prime minister, a senator, a governor-to-be, knowing that others would recognize the shadows she was describing. Midway through reading, I found myself wondering how it must have felt for her to relive every one of those nights while dictating them to her ghostwriter, Amy Wallace. Maybe it was like reopening a wound just to prove it existed. Amy has said publicly that Virginia wanted the truth to live even if she didn't. And that's what this book does. If you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps this community grow, and it means we can keep talking about stories that matter. Back to the Guardian's take. The reviewer highlights that Giuffre's book isn't simply a memoir of trauma, but also a guide to understanding how predators hide behind prestige. It shows how trafficking can exist in plain sight, how someone can look free while still being completely trapped. It also reminds readers that Epstein and Maxwell were only two faces of a much larger structure, one protected by politics, money, and silence. In the end, the book leaves us with questions that echo louder than any courtroom verdict. Who were the ones she couldn't name? How many are still walking free? And how much of her courage did it take to tell even part of the truth? To me, Nobody's Girl isn't only Virginia Giuffre's story. It's a mirror held up to power and to us. What stayed with me most were 5 moments that made me pause and feel the air change around me. The first was her memory of being 16, standing in her Mar-a-Lago uniform when Ghislaine Maxwell first approached her with a false promise of opportunity. A single conversation that turned her life into captivity. The second was the grotesque suggestion that she become a surrogate mother for Epstein and Maxwell's future child, as if her body could be repurposed for their legacy. The third was her discovery of an ectopic pregnancy she hadn't even known she'd suffered during that time. A quiet, devastating sign of what those years took from her health as well as her youth. The fourth was her realization that the abuse wasn't isolated at all, but global, spanning countries, islands, and cities. A web that only wealth could sustain. And the fifth, the one that still breaks me, was her final email saying that if anything happened to her, the book must be published anyway. It's impossible to read that and not feel both grief and admiration. When I closed the book, I thought less about the crimes and more about the cost of telling them. The toll it takes for a woman to step into her own nightmare again, just so we might finally believe it happened. Nobody's Girl asks us not only to see her as a survivor, but to look honestly at the systems that created the men she feared to name. Thank you for being here, for staying with a difficult story, and for honoring Virginia's voice. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these conversations alive. And as we close, remember the door we opened at the beginning. Some doors lead to rooms of power, others to rooms of silence. Virginia's book teaches us that opening them, no matter how painful, is the only way light ever gets in.